Hey, hello, it's Neal Romanek, and it's a driving vlog, or a drog, a dog, a droog. It's a droog. So, welcome to my droog. Every week, or every a couple weeks, I drive home to Ealing, where I live, from Westbourne Grove area, which is kind of near Notting Hill. It's a nice, lovely, posh-ish section of West London. One of the great things that happens on my drive home from Westbourne Grove is that I drive past Michael Powell's old house, which we're coming up here in a little bit. Michael Powell, one of my favorite filmmakers. There's that chunk of British filmmakers, revered British filmmakers from the 1930s, 40s. They started in the 40s, really, and defined British cinema, and I think a lot of subsequently American cinema and world cinema. And Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, who together formed the Archers, their production company, were a cornerstone of a lot of that. As a matter of fact, Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger's movie Stairway to Heaven, aka A Matter of Life and Death. It was called Stairway to Heaven in the US and A Matter of Life and Death here in the UK. That is showing at the BFI in a couple weeks, and I may drag my family over to it. So here's Michael Powell's house coming up here. I like to look at that place and imagine romantic nights spent with Deborah Kerr, because they used to hang out, you know what I'm saying? And hanging out with old Emeric, changing the way that British cinema was going to operate. They were great idealists. When they started their company, they wrote up a credo, the Archers Credo, about how the company should run, what it should be about, the ideals that it should have, and I'll put that down in the notes of this video. And it's still great today, especially given, obviously we're in a very corporatized, to say the least, corporatized world. So the idea of a credo, a company credo, that puts integrity and artistic integrity and service to the industry, service to the material first and foremost, I think would be maybe more useful now than ever. So I'll put that in the notes and you can have a look at that. I guess my favorite Michael Powell film is, it changes all the time. In the same way, people say, what's your favorite top 3 films, or what's your favorite film, or maybe what's your favorite top 10 favorite films. That list always changes depending on how I'm feeling, what I've seen lately, what I'm thinking about. But Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger films, Michael Powell films generally, are ones that really change over a lot. If I look at some of those other British directors who are my favorites, like David Lean. David Lean, I can always say it's probably Zhivago, Dr. Zhivago. Although, obviously Lawrence of Arabia is the masterpiece. But there are certain films that speak to you in certain ways. And I usually say it's Zhivago, probably. But with the Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger movies, it's always different. So lately, I'm going to say my favorite Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger film is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. And I love it because it's long. I like a long movie. I like a big old long saga, and that it covers a man's entire life. I love it because it's politically relevant to the time. I mean, it's about World War II, and it's a World War II. It's a World War II propaganda film to a certain extent. But like everything that Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger did, it is operating on all kinds of different levels, with all kinds of emotional and spiritual depth to it. That the idea of calling it a World War II propaganda film is silly to a certain extent, because it is about so much more. There's so much more going on in it. It's about history. It's about a man's life through a section of history, the first 50 years of the first 40 years of the 20th century. So I love that angle. I like movies about history. And it's got Deborah Kerr playing several different roles, which is, you know, the more Deborah Kerr, the better, as far as I'm concerned. It's got a great kind of very subtle, very British or very English to a certain extent, contained, restrained love story. A lot of the English and British love stories are about not getting what you want, or holding back from what you want, or you could say repression, but I think there's also about restraint, and that restraint creates a lot of romance. That is, I think, the key element in British romances, and why they're so popular. Really, you wouldn't think about the British romance, but there's an element that British English romance has that is unique to the culture, and that you see that in like movies like, obviously, A Room with a View is all about that. You know, A Room with a View is that tension between wildness and propriety, and passion versus tradition, conformity, doing the right thing, and that, you know, goes on in British romances. Brief Encounter, obviously, is the great one for that. And as we know, you know, from Romeo and Juliet onwards, you know, if you can't have it, if you can't do it, it's all the more exciting. So Colonel Blimp has that element too in it, which is great. So yeah, I love The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. But you know, next week it could be different. It could be The Red Shoes again, which is extraordinary and terrifying. Black Narcissus, extraordinary and terrifying. I do love Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven, as I said, is coming up at the BFI, and I'll make us see that. And that has got, Stairway to Heaven has got one of the, you know, one of the greatest sort of love scenes or romantic moments for me in movies, and the most amazing thing that they do, that the Archers do with it, Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, outrageously, it's like at the beginning of the movie when you haven't even met the characters yet. It's like, here are these two, they're showing off so much. It's like, okay, here's these two characters, you don't know a thing about them, and we're gonna make you crazy for them, and we're gonna make you terribly sad about the end of the fabulous, passionate love affair that could never ever be. Here it is, like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and it's just this moment between David Niven and why have I forgotten her name? I've forgotten her name because I'm tremendously old. But anyway, it's that, and I'm trying to drive. But there's that moment between the two of them with, you know, David Niven just being awesome. David Niven. He's being David Niven, being this character, like the coolest, most awesome guy, and saying the most awesome things, and she is she falls in love with him over the radio. They're talking on the radio. David Niven's going down in flames. They're talking over the radio. He's just being his awesome David Niven self, and she's completely in love with him, and that's it, you know, and that's kicks off the movie. And not many filmmakers can pull that off. You know, very few, if any, can do that in, like, you know, the first moments of a movie like that. At that level, with that, you know, to make us care that much, and with that grace and beauty and straightforwardness. So I love Stairway to Heaven. What else? What are the favorite Powell Pressburgers? Yeah, they're always neck and neck up there. Colonel Blimp, Stairway to Heaven, Black Narcissus. Black Narcissus was the first Powell and Pressburger movie. That's not true, actually. No, the first Powell and Pressburger movie I ever saw was The Red Shoes, and I went with my mom and dad. It was showing at the Dayton Art Institute. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and there was a screening at the Dayton Art Institute. And I went with my mom and dad, kind of not very willingly. I think I was probably about 14, I want to say, maybe 15. I don't know. I was early teenagery. And I was like, oh, I gotta see this thing. And I saw it. And it was, it was a lot of dancing in. But I do remember, oh, that's strange. Oh, that's weird. What's that? What? And, I did, some of it I was quite bored. But I did remember there's something very odd going on in this movie that I don't get, that I don't understand. That I had a sense that this movie was deeper and wider than I was able to take in at that time. And then I saw it again. I guess I probably saw it. I probably had the Criterion Laserdisc. Remember Laserdiscs? I had so many Laserdiscs, and Criterion, which, let's not underestimate how important the Criterion Laserdiscs were to the development of filmmaking. That Criterion decided, Laserdisc is the format, the best possible format for reproducing movies. This was in, the 1990s. And they said, we're going to do the best possible Laserdiscs we can of films, the best possible versions of films we're going to do. And we're going to include all these extras. And they're going to be these little gems for movie lovers to study and collect. And it's going to be great. And they set the standard for years and years. I don't really think, now that we're all in a kind of entirely digital realm, online realm, IT realm, what Criterion did in terms of creating these packages that doesn't really exist anymore in the online realm. Everything is broken into bits, so you can have a decent version of a film, but you're going to have to come to YouTube right here to get a good analysis, or you're going to have to go somewhere else to get a good documentary about a film. Whereas Criterion was collecting all those into a single package, a single unit. It was amazing. So the Criterion collection, Laserdiscs, they did a lot of great Powell and Pressburger movies. They did Black Narcissus and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and Peeping Tom, I think, and several of those. The Tales of Hoffman, I think there was a Tales of Hoffman disc. And I think that was when I saw The Red Shoes again. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This is a terrible, frightening, amazing movie about the bloody danger of being an artist, and the tragedy of being an artist, the curse of being an artist or a creative, and why we avoid it, because it's not something you want to get involved in. Being, creative, artist, creating things, not something you want to do. Very troublesome and difficult. Avoid at all costs. And I'd seen it a couple times since then in various screenings, or there'd always be a Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger festival. I'd always go to that, try to catch the big hits. So yeah, The Red Shoes. Another one of my favorites, which we watched not too long ago, which my wife likes very much, and my daughter enjoyed, is I Know Where I'm Going, with Wendy Hiller. It's black and white film, I don't want to guess on the date, but one of the earlier films, kind of before they started doing their Technicolor movies. And when Wendy Hiller goes to Scotland, it's a romance. It's a lot of what Powell and Pressburger do. A romance with the spiritual element, with a sort of dark undercurrent, and elements of higher powers operating. Sometimes those higher powers are more ghostly and spiritual in, say, as they are in The Stairway to Heaven. And I Know Where I'm Going, that's nature and chance and the weight of history, maybe. So yeah, that's a great one. Anyway, what I'm trying to say, I love Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger. I love The Archers. You should see all those movies. Martin Scorsese certainly helped give The Archers a boost, because he always talked about how much he loved the movies and how much he loved Michael Powell films. And then all the film geeks came out and were like, oh yeah, I love Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger, man, totally great, man, it's super. Because Martin Scorsese liked, them, and they figured that it was the thing to do if you're going to be if you're going to be a easy writer, if you're going to be an easy writer. What is that in the book? Easy Writers, Peeping Toms? I think it was Easy Writers, Peeping Toms was that book from the 1990s about the early filmmakers. It's Easy Writers, Peeping Toms, Mr. Goodbars. Peeping Toms, Mr. Goodbars, that's what it was. So Peeping Toms, Mr. Goodbars, that book about all those filmmakers, really influential book. People loved that book, and people, wanted to be those guys, those cool guys. And so if you wanted to be one of those cool guys like Martin Scorsese, you had to like Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger. I don't know how many of those people really, how if it really stuck with a lot of people, if that was a lot of just, emulating your heroes or not. But I do, remember that was a big deal. Martin Scorsese talking up Michael Powell and raising kind of the public consciousness about him, because he hadn't really been, he'd kind of been forgotten a bit, because he was sort of odd, out of the mainstream, didn't necessarily fit perfectly into that classic British filmmaking tradition that we know and love. He was more blatantly independent in his thinking and experimental in his filmmaking. Not completely experimental, but kind of riding the edge. Whereas, David Lean would be, fold in with David Lean, it appeared to be these big classic cinematic traditional stories that you thought you were watching, but you're really watching something quite deep and subversive. So yeah, Michael Powell, Emeric Pressburger. If you haven't seen the films, start watching them. You may have seen some already. I would start, if I were you, I would start with something, you could say, if you want to start with something very heavy duty, watch Black Narcissus, and you will say, holy shit, may very well be your reaction. If you want something a little lighter, start with A Matter of Life and Death, aka Stairway to Heaven. Or I Know Where I'm Going. I Know Where I'm Going is great. I Know Where I'm Going is a movie for everybody. So good. Anyway, so that's it. I'm almost home. That was my drive. You drove home with me from Westbourne Grove, which is northwest London, North London, to Ealing. Now we're in Ealing, and I am almost home. And this is good. I like having a long monologue because it's less to edit, frankly. And I can get it up online faster. See ya. Bye. Oh yeah, and I wanted to add, of course, I meant to put in there that Thelma Schoonmaker, Martin Scorsese's editor, the brilliant Thelma S., was, of course, married to Michael Powell for years and years and years. So there was that connection with Michael Powell kind of directly. So Martin Scorsese and Michael Powell really sort of family. Anyway, I forgot to add that little factoid. Thanks. See you later. Bye.